A good Erev Shabbos on this Friday afternoon. I wanted to share a Dvar Torah, and I also wanted to dedicate it to the Yartzeit of Myra, Kraft, Aleha, Hashalom of blessed memory. A remarkable woman, a pillar of our community in Chestnut Hill in the Boston area, who loved Judaism, tremendous passion for Yiddishkeit and for Israel, and she instilled and embedded that in her children and of course her husband Robert, who together have such a huge impact on our entire community in Boston and Israel, and especially us Chabad at Chestnut Hill. So I want to dedicate this Dvar Torah to her 12th Yartzeit, which is today, the 18th of Tammuz. You know, talking about leadership and the type of leader that Myra was, today, in this week's Torah portion, we read about Moses preparing to pass away. It's after 39 years the Jews are in the desert, and God tells Moses, come up to the mountain, Mount Avarim, which means the mountain of passing, and you will see the land of Israel, but you will not enter it. Imagine Moses, the greatest leader who loved and sacrificed for the Jewish people from when they were in Egypt, through them going to Mount Sinai to get the Torah, through them traveling through and traversing through the desert for 40 years. And God tells him, you will not be able to go into the land of Israel. And then Moses, in the most powerful words, turns to God and says, God, you tell me that I will not go into the land of Israel. But please, Yifked Elikim Elekei Ruchot, may the God of all spirits should appoint a leader upon the Jewish people. Asher Yartzeit Lifneim, that will go out in front of them. Asher Yavei Lifneim, that will go walk in before them. So they shouldn't be, the Jewish people shouldn't be like sheep without a shepherd. And the question, of course, is, what made Moses at this moment say this? And the rabbis say that Moses saw that Aaron had his children become the high priest in his place. And he saw the continuity of the daughters of Tzalafchad, which we read about in this portion, getting the inheritance of their father and their mother. And he turns to God and he says, God, I want my children to be able to have the same. And appoint a leader that will nurture the Jewish people. And what does God tell him? He says, I'll appoint a leader. But the leader won't be your physical DNA. It won't be your children. Moses' children don't continue in his way. They don't become the next leaders. But it'll be your loyal servant Joshua. The continuity will continue. But it's the ideas. It's the legacy. It's the love for Judaism and for Torah and for God that you leave that will continue. And that's the most important thing. And in fact, the mountain called Mount Avarim is also from the word Avarim, to have a continuity, to continue. Because what God was telling Moses, you are the leader who instilled, who loved the Jewish people, who inspired them to want to go into the land of Israel, to love the Torah, to love Judaism. That will continue. That legacy will continue. And God tells Moses to put his hand upon Joshua and give him from his spirit. And what does Moses do? Moses puts two hands upon Joshua. Says Rashi that the reason why Moses put two hands is because Moses was a leader who wasn't worried about sharing and inspiring his leadership. He wanted to give Joshua more than God asked. And of course, Joshua becomes the one who takes the Jewish people into Israel. And we say that Moshe is like the face of the sun, and Joshua is like the face of the moon. Because the moon has no light on its own. It's only a reflection of the sun. And that's the type of leader Joshua was. He continued the legacy, the inspiration, that idea that Moses instilled in him. And the truth is that that's the message to all of us. Today on the Yartzeit, Myra, person who was a leader in the community, and I look at her children, her family, and we see that idea, that legacy, that love for Israel, for Judaism continues. Although she's not with us, her legacy continues with us. I once heard the story that happened 15 years ago about this 5th grade teacher in a yeshiva in Brooklyn that was being honored at a dinner. And he went to his teacher, who was his teacher 45 years ago, and he handed him an invitation. He says, please, I want you to come to the dinner, they're honoring me. So the teacher says, listen, they honored him, even though he was an older man, I'm going to go. But he wondered why they honored him. And at the dinner, the teacher who's being honored gets up and says, I want to tell you a story. 50 years ago, I was in school, and I came from a poor family. And it was around Hanukkah time, and there was a kid who came into school, and he got this fancy watch that he was gifted by his family that I did not get. I could never afford that. And I was a 3rd grade kid. And I went, and during recess I stole the watch. I put it in my pocket. The kid went crying to the teacher and to the principal. And the teacher came and asked us all, if you took the watch, give it to me. I won't punish you. Just give it back to the child. And of course, no one did. I was too embarrassed. I was too ashamed. And then the teacher said, listen, we have no choice. But before everyone leaves, we're all going to line up against the wall. And we're going to close our eyes. Everyone's going to close their eyes. And they're going to take their pockets and turn them inside out. Whatever's in their pocket will fall on the floor. And sure enough, we all did that. And the teacher went and collected everything. And I, with my eyes closed, pulled my pocket inside out and the watch fell out. And the teacher never punished me. And because of the way the teacher handled me, not to embarrass me, and didn't embarrass me in public, that's what inspired me to be a teacher. And then afterwards, after he finishes his speech, he's speaking to the teacher who he points out, who was the one he invited. And he says to him afterwards in private, he says, I have one question for you. I understand that you made us all close our eyes. You didn't want to embarrass me in public. But why didn't you punish me later? Why didn't you punish me? And the teacher looks at him and says, what are you talking about? I also closed my eyes. Could you imagine the teacher? 45 years later, he still never knew which was the child that took the watch because he didn't want to embarrass the child. And this is the leadership God talks about to Moses. He says, your legacy, your continuity will continue. Your love for the people, for Israel, for morality, for values, the Torah you taught them. You are the true leader. Think about this teacher who 50 years later, his student who he didn't embarrass and he closed his eyes on became